Hi.
Hey. So are we doing more refactoring? I see like 7 things still left to do.
Yes, and one of the things that is marked as done, I want to revisit.
As if we didn't do enough of that
The
already.
database stuff.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
What happened?
There is a weird bug that
Yeah.
most people will never run into in their
Yep.
lives. But it may happen, and I want to fix it because the fix is a single line that needs to change.
What is it?
It is this. Okay, so look at how we implemented, for instance, the delete method.
Yep.
We first get an item,
Yes.
and then we delete the item.
Yep.
Now suppose that two people try to delete the same item or mark the same item as done.
It's a race condition.
It's a race condition. So suppose that two people are trying to change or to try to mark the same item as done.
Yep.
Right next to one another at the same time. What happens is they are both going to find the item in the database.
Yep.
And then when they try to delete, the deletion works like this. It just issues the delete.
It's just a delete request, yes.
Yeah, it just issues the delete to the database.
Yeah.
But it always succeeds.
Yep.
So both will succeed.
Yeah.
They will both be able to get the item.
And both will be able to delete it, which is incorrect.
And both will be able to delete it. So this is a race condition because people need to be racing. They need to both reach this line at the same time.
Yep.
Because if one reaches this part first,
yep.
this other part here will not succeed for the other one.
Yeah.
So they need to both reach the highlighted part simultaneously before they reach this part. But because database actions are so fast, this is super uncommon.
Yeah.
This is like super hard to run into.
Yeah.
So here's what I can do to show that the bug exists. I'm going to extract this into its own variable. I'm going to go into refactoring and extract variable.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to call this item.
Yeah.
In between the get and the delete, I am going to sleep for a moment. So thread.sleep is something that it will wait for 5 seconds between the two. So this simulates a database being very slow, which is not the case.
Unlikely, yeah, it's highly unlikely.
But still, it's something that we can try out. So here I can restart the server. Now it's in this weird situation, this weird condition. And let's go here to Postman, and I will create 2 requests for something in the database. So let's see something in the database. The database currently contains the identifier 28. So let's take the delete request, copy it real quick, and I will create a delete request for the item 28. And I create another delete request
for 28 again.
For 28 again.
Yep.
Right, so here we have 2 requests that are going to run against one another.
Yep.
And they are running on this patched server that waits for 5 seconds.
Yes.
So we will see the race condition. And that means both requests are going to succeed. Because what we wanted is for only one to succeed. Because when you delete something or you mark an item as done, it is marked as done.
It's done, yeah. It can't exist for any other user to intercept.
So we expected to see here a 204, which means marked as done. And another one should be a 404.
Yeah,
I couldn't find that. Because I couldn't find that. Exactly. So let's see. I run this one and I run this one. Now I wait for 5 seconds. That's the loading. The server is running.
Yeah. Okay,
and I see a 204. And I see another 204.
That's not right.
The possibility of this happening in a real world scenario is like super small.
Yep.
But we just showed that it can happen.
So with large-scale applications, it is still possible, considering you have so many users that may be trying to do the same thing at a particular point of time, but then you have different architectures to mitigate this. However, you should keep in mind that race conditions might exist because we didn't think of it at all.
Yeah, and it's super rare, and it is something that we introduced when we refactored. In the last episode, I proposed this refactoring in which we get the item from the database, because then we are able to throw the item not found exception, which we handle in a single place, and that's all super nice. But in this refactory, we introduced this bug.
Yeah.
Now this is super rare. I mean, I have a service. Again, I opened my my research history in front of everyone. So I have this service called Kill the Newsletter that I run online, and it has tens of thousands of users, and the thing is being hit like 5 times a second.
Okay.
And still I could only detect one race conditioning happening in this app because I didn't do the right thing.
Yeah.
My code looked like this except for the thread sleep.
Yeah.
And I ran into a race condition that it could detect only once in like 3 or 4 years with tens of
thousands of actually people using this.
Yeah. So this is super rare, but still the fix is so simple. So let's fix this. It's super simple. It's the same thing we were doing before. So when you try to delete an item, you check, did I delete something?
Yeah, if it actually returns a row count of more than 0.
Yeah, so if I executed the delete, but I couldn't delete anything from the database, I can throw the now item not found exception.
Exactly, yeah.
And I have to say that this method is going to maybe throw that exception, but the point is now, if we are throwing this exception, it will trigger the same handler.
Yeah,
so we are again reusing this code, which is awesome because
so the refactoring actually helps us. We might have introduced a new bug, but we found that there was an issue that can be handled.
Yep. So we were previously using this handler to both delete and edit items. Right here and right here, the get one may throw this exception. Now we are using it in another place and it just works. Because we are throwing the right exception, it will be handled just fine, and it will throw the 404 that we wanted. So now let's rerun the server and show in Postman that this is working. So again, I'll have to go to the get request to get an identifier.
I think 30 might be there. Yeah,
30 might be there. It is. So now I can change this to 30, and I can change this to 30. Yeah. So and I will send a request. They will take 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Loading. And this says 204.
That's good.
That's good. And 404.
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. So we solved this race condition.
Possible race condition, yeah.
And then I can remove the thread sleeve. I can inline this item. I believe there is a refactoring for inlining. And then we also have to change the exact same thing. The exact same race condition may happen on update.
Update, yeah.
So if you are trying to update an item while someone else is trying to delete that item, this execute update will return 0. So we have to say throw an item not found exception. I will not bother with trying to show this in Postman. Just believe me, it's exactly the same case. And this solves the race condition. I believe all the tests are still passing, so I'm going to rerun the server.
And the test suite.
Go to the runner and rerun the test. So is this the only solution to race condition?
No, I think there's other ways to handle this, but this is the simplest one.
Yeah, so everything is passing. We're still getting that error. It seems to only happen
sometimes. Yeah, that's so weird. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why it's happening sometimes. We'll have to investigate this later. In fact, I think I will add an item here to investigate. It's never happening on CI. The CI is always happy, so I don't know. Investigate why Postman sometimes fails. And we'll do this later.
Yep.
The point here is there are other solutions. In particular, there's a solution called transactions.
Yeah.
On the database, you have a way to say, don't try to, or try to prevent race conditions in this bunch of requests. So you could start a transaction before you do the get one.
Yeah, so get and delete will occur together and no one can interfere in the middle.
Yeah, so the database will not change in the middle of the get one and update or get one and delete. But we didn't bother with transactions because this thing was so simple.
Yeah.
So now let's commit this and move on to the next task. Let me just review and see if everything seems good. Everything does not seem good because we have an item that is not being used here. So I can organize the imports, and it removed one import. I was again using Option Control O to organize imports. And now I'm going to commit
Yeah, now it looks
Yeah,
race
and it's
condition.
interesting that we only changed the repository to fix this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Excellent. So fix race condition.
Yeah.
Moving on, the next, and now I'm happy with having this item as marked as done. Moving on,
now we're on controllers.
let's extract a controller.
Okay.
Or extract, yeah, just one controller in this case.
Yeah.
So here we have these lambdas that are handling the requests,
Yeah.
the get request, the post request, and
Yeah.
so on. Now this is fine if you have only a few methods, only a few of those API endpoints.
Like some particular selected, let's say 4 or 5 operations or something.
And this is the case right here. I mean, we only have 4, and they only occupy like
standard
10 lines of
CRUD
code.
operations.
And they are very simple, But we are building this application to grow. We are establishing a pattern for growing the application. So this will grow.
This will grow in a bad way.
Yeah, and we want to extract.
Grow, just not well.
We want to extract these handlers into their own house. And then
own function, own class, something that takes away control from this particular, like every particular function of routes here, and just use that central class or a controller class to do everything.
Yes. And then the server class will only have the responsibility of setting up the things in the server. So it will set up static files, it will set up the database, it will create the repositories, it will say that you need to close the database when the server goes down, and it will match all the API endpoints with their corresponding methods in the controller.
Exactly.
That's the purpose of the server, to set up everything about the server. And then the controller will have the responsibility of handling the requests. Let's extract this controller. In the Javalin documentation, there is this thing called the handler groups, and that's what we are going to use. But let's start with something simple. Let's start with this guy, maybe, right?
Yeah.
So this is a lambda that is handling the GET request.
So you need a function for this in another class.
Exactly. So let's create another class. So here we have the package that we are. We have our application in this package. Let's create a package for controllers, following the pattern of a package for models,
and repositories, and now controllers.
And now controllers. Let's create a new class, and I'm going to call it again items controller. This class doesn't have any methods for now, but I would like to extract this method, or
into that,
really this whole lambda into a method into that class. First problem we ran into.
You need a repository there.
Yeah, we need the items repository there. Let's see if we can do this. Well, first, note that this lambda doesn't return anything. We never say return.
No, there's
if
nothing.
If we want to return something, we say context. Write that to the response body.
To the context,
Write that to response body in particular. So we would like to get this line into a method here, and we know that this method, well, first of all, it needs to be public. Because we need it to be accessible.
In another package,
And then it doesn't return anything.
So it's void.
And we can call this maybe get all after the get all method from the items repository. It receives as argument the context. And now I have to be explicit about the type, and I have to say context. And I have to import the context from Javalin. And then we can copy that line over here. But we need the items repository. How do we deal with that? Well,
you can just like import that class and use a variable.
Import that class?
Like just open items repository, scroll up. I think, you can just create an object of items repository in items controller.
Exactly. So the same way that we are receiving the connection
here,
the same way that we are receiving the connection here in the items repository, we can receive the items repository
in the items controller.
In the items controller. Again, the fancy name for this is dependency injection. The repository needs a connection to work. So it receives one as argument in the constructor. The controller needs a repository to work. So it receives a repository in the controller. So private items repository, and I'm going to call it unimaginatively items repository. I'm going to create a constructor that receives this guy as argument. And now it is there. And I can say get all, which may throw an exception, whatever.
Right. Then you need to change server.
Yes, now I need to change the server to actually use this controller.
Yes.
So after I have created the items repository, I can create
an items controller.
Items controller receiving the items repository as argument. And here, instead of having this as a lambda, I can have this as a reference to the getAll method.
Okay. So, but this is not a static method, though.
This is not a static method. So this double semicolon may be new to many people. What this is doing is it's getting a reference to that method in that object.
Yeah.
So now I am not I'm not calling the getAll method. I could be calling the getAll method, but that wouldn't make sense. What I want to do is when this API point is reached, I want to run this method. So I need a reference to the method.
Yep.
Maybe you are familiar with C, in which you can have pointers to functions. Maybe you are familiar with JavaScript, in which a function can be a value. Like we have that in JavaScript all over the place. Let's see. In the resources folder, we have our little JavaScript right here. And I believe we have this somewhere. It doesn't appear that we have it anywhere. Yeah, but for instance, here we have a function, right?
Yeah.
I could extract this into its own function. I'm going to call it f. And I could say something like this. So functions are values.
Yeah.
And I can have a reference to a function like that.
Okay.
Similar thing in Java, we can have a reference to a method like that.
Method references, okay.
Okay, I'm undoing this. And that's what's happening here. So we are saying, I don't want to call this method right away. I want to pass it as a reference to Javalin, so that Javalin will call this method the same way it was calling the lambda.
Yep.
All right. Now, let's see if this works. By rerunning the server, we're running the tests.
It does? Okay.
It is working. Now we can pull a similar trick for all these other handlers. This one, and that one, and finally this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do it.
I'm first going to grab this one. I'm going to call it create because it's the name that is used in the repository. So create context ctx, paste this here. Yes, it may throw an exception. And then I say items controller create.
This abstracts away a lot in the sense that it's pretty easy to read as well. Like if I have to read like 2 lines of code, I will understand what is happening rather than looking at the entire method and figuring out, okay, this is what you're trying to do.
Yeah. Also, I like how in IntelliJ, if you have the cursor here and you want to see, oh, I see that I'm getting all in this items controller, but I really want to see how it's implemented. Just command and arrow down, it takes you to the implementation. And I find this super cool because then you have a way to quickly navigate between the server and the parts of the implementation that you care about. And you can do, of course, the same anywhere. So if I want to see how the repository implements getAll, I can just command and arrow down, and I go to that implementation.
Okay.
And I can even do that for things like array list in Java.
This will go to your Java
and
classes.
Now it's going into the JDK, into the Java implementation of array list. And this is Java code that was written by Oracle sometime in the past, which is, I think, super cool if you are trying to figure out how something works. Okay, next one, delete. So I'm going to copy this, go into the controller, create another one of these public void delete, in this case, context ctx, it may throw an exception, and paste, and blah, blah, blah.
Okay, yeah, this is in the items repository, fine.
And then I do the same thing again. Items controller, delete, and finally put the final one, copy, public void edit, I suppose.
Update.
Update. Fair.
Yeah. Consistency across the board. Yep. Got it. And you need to change that. And that's that.
This is the whole code for our server. Super nice, huh?
What's that, like 20 lines?
Yeah.
Like actually 20 lines.
Yeah. Super cool. But it doesn't end there. There is one more trick up my sleeve. Well,
First
before I will show you that the thing is still doing the same.
Yeah.
It is still
Let's
passing.
not break stuff, right?
Yeah, I don't know
that's a
why
different
I'm not
thing, yeah.
figuring this one out yet. So yeah, it works
Yep.
most of the time. Next, I told you that I was going to use these handler groups. This is just a more compact way of writing this. This is more explicit. We are seeing /items everywhere. But we could have a typo like this.
Yeah.
It would be annoying. So there is a way to make this more compact, and it's using the app routes. It takes a lambda, and then in the roots we can say path path, in this case users,
items, yeah.
but we can say path items. This also takes a lambda, and it's complaining about the lack of path, so I just imported it, and then we have to say something like get.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we can say get, and then we say what handles get. So the thing I'm writing over here.
This will work when it's a get request.
Yeah, so here I have to say import static method. So now this line is equivalent to this one.
Yeah.
And we don't need to say the slash. The documentation says that
yeah, it's implied. It can add it. Yes.
Yeah, they are equivalent. Path prefixes your paths with slash. So we can say it like this. And then we can delete this line.
Yeah.
And then we can say
the same for create.
Yeah, we say the same for post.
Yeah.
And we don't have to repeat /items because it's already here in the path. So we just say that. And the same for put. Oh, except that put
you need
and
an
delete.
identifier for those.
Yes, I need an identifier for those. And I have an example of how this works right here. Just use path again. So I can just say path.
Okay, so it's a nested thing now.
Yes, it is. Path identifier.
Yep.
Again, it receives a lambda.
And you can do the same for delete input.
Delete is handled by this part of the controller, and put is handled by this part of the controller. Now, what is interesting is that just by nesting this path within this path, it knows that it means /items is /identifier. And you can nest this arbitrarily, though I think that nesting twice or maybe 3 times is probably the most you want to nest.
Okay.
But see, you can do that. And with that, we have a very neat way of defining this controller.
Okay, so just let's try and run this once.
We can run this, yes, sir.
That should be that.
Yeah. So now this is slightly more lines because of this closing. It's more lines than we had before, but I would say that this is
still cleaner. Yeah,
it's better organized. You don't have the /items everywhere.
You have lesser chance of making a mistake.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of taste. If you want to do it the other way, I think it's fine. It's also okay if you want to just put all the handlers in the server class instead of having a controller. It's a trade-off. Now there is one more layer of indirection.
Of abstraction there, yeah.
But I believe that this is better organized, especially if your app is going to grow a lot.
Yeah.
You keep your roots organized all in one place. And if you had all the standard methods, so get all, create, delete, and update, and I believe there is only one missing. And that is if you wanted to have one page for an item. If you have all the standard methods for manipulating a resource, then that is to list all the resources, to see the details of one resource.
Get one.
Yeah, I can show you this in GitHub, for instance. Here we have a list of issues.
Yeah.
In this case, there is only one, but actually there are
Get
lists.
all. Yeah.
So this is a list of issues, and then you go into a detail for one issue,
Okay.
and then you can edit that
Yeah.
issue, and you can close or delete or mark as done that issue, which was something we had available before here, but we do have available here, close issue. So you have all these different actions.
CRUD operations here.
They are called CRUD for create, read, update,
delete,
and delete. So if you have all of this, there is a CRUD handler that it does the same thing we were seeing here.
It just compresses all of it together, basically.
In just one line. And then you can just have that controller uses controller. In our case, it would be items controller, and we would pass an argument here that would be the items repository. But in any case, we would have just items / item ID or whatever.
That would be some places though. If you scroll down, the interface shows that it needs for get one, for update, and for delete. That's all you need the resource ID for.
Yeah. And then if you have that, you could say that your users controller implements the CRUD handler, and you could say get all, get one, create, update, and delete, all in one place, and it would make the code even simpler. But we don't have a get one. We don't need it for our app. We do need a get one in the repository when we are doing the deletion or the editing. But we don't have it we don't have a controller for it. We have no way to go into a single item to see its details. Because there are no details for an item. So in this case, we have to be explicit and spell everything out. But I believe this looks nice.
Yeah, it does.
I will commit and create a pull request.
And all this,
blah, blah, blah. Maybe later, but I believe that this is done for now. And next, we have to... I will not create a pull request just yet.
We have stuff to do.
Yeah, I will not create a pull request just yet. But on the next one, we are going to talk about JavaScript. And that will be the end.
Really?
We are reaching the end, the final episodes.
Yeah. Maybe the last two, maybe. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
See you on the next one.
Bye-bye.